My name is Mary Faulkner, and I am a League of Women Voters of Duluth member, as well as a trained and certified moderator, and I have the pleasure of moderating this forum. On behalf of the League of Women Voters of Duluth, I would like to welcome everyone. The League of Women Voters is pleased to present these general issues forums for the Minnesota House of Representatives District 8B. Thank you, candidates, for your willingness to participate in state government and in this forum. The forum will be presented on PACT-TV and linked to the League of Women Voters of Duluth website. Feel free to share the forum with others. The League of Women Voters of Duluth posts complete, unedited recordings of forums. Editing is authorized only for official media reporting. Excerpts or edited clips of candidate forums may not be used for partisan political purposes. The League of Women Voters believes that an informed citizenry is the foundation of effective democracy. The League is open to membership for men and women who are interested in nonpartisan civic participation. The League of Women Voters of Duluth realizes that creative and innovative policies and practices are forged out of diverse points of view. We believe diverse perspectives are necessary and responsible for representative decision-making. We acknowledge our commitment to welcome and facilitate diversity, equity, inclusion in all aspects of our work. We strive to include people from a mix of abilities and backgrounds in all of our activities. And you are invited to join us. For more information, check out our website at www.lwvduluth.org. The League of Women Voters is a nonpartisan volunteer organization that works at the local, state, and national level to encourage citizens to participate in government. While we as a league do study and take stands on issues, we do not endorse or support political parties or candidates. The views expressed in this forum are those of the participating candidates and not those of the League of Women Voters of Duluth. Additionally, LWV sponsorship of this forum is not a league endorsement of any of the individual candidates participating. Please remember to exercise your right to vote in the general election on Tuesday, November 8th. At this time, I'd like to introduce our candidates, Becky Hall, Alicia Kozlowski. Thanks again for being here. Our forum will begin with the candidates giving a 2-minute opening statement, followed by a questioning round. Questions have been vetted by the League of Women Voters of Duluth committees. Candidates were not given the questions in advance. Each candidate will be given up to 1.5 minutes in which to provide their responses. The questioning round has been set up so that each candidate will be asked questions in a rotating order, and the order was determined at random. After the questioning round is complete, each candidate will be allowed a 2-minute closing statement prior to the end of the forum. The candidates will now provide their prepared opening statements. We will begin with candidate Hall.
Thank you, Mary, and thank you, League of Women Voters, for this opportunity to talk about my candidacy as I run for the Minnesota House of Representatives. You know, state government is, or at least should be, pretty simple. It should help you and me as citizens lead better, safer, healthier lives. It should provide roads and other infrastructure, and it should do so while taking as few of our tax dollars as possible. Unfortunately, it's not that simple, especially the taking fewer of our tax dollars part. As Minnesotans, we should be proud that we want to provide excellent education for our kids, protect the environment, and help those less fortunate than we are. But we have to be smarter about it. We can't keep throwing large amounts of dollars at every unnecessary program that comes along. Remember where those dollars come from. They're your tax dollars. How much extra do you have in your family budget to send to the state once you're done paying higher prices for gas and groceries, once you've seen how far your retirement savings has disappeared, and once you've gasped over your latest property tax statement? It doesn't have to be this way, folks. We talk about runaway government spending, but never do anything about it. Well, let's start now. When I represent you in St. Paul, I will constantly remind elected officials that government should only do what its citizens truly need and what they can afford. In addition to protecting your tax dollars, 3 major areas of my focus will be on increasing public safety and giving our brave law enforcement professionals the tools to keep us and themselves safe, on supporting development of proven homegrown energy resources, and on removing roadblocks that hinder job creation. As a former economic development representative for the state of Minnesota, I worked often with the legislature in that area of job creation. I know what we can do if we put our collective minds together. And again, I thank you for the opportunity, and I look forward to the questions.
Thank you, Candidate Hall. Candidate Kozlowski?
Excellent. Well, thank you so much for the opportunity to the league to be here. I'm really proud to be the DFL candidate running for the Minnesota House in 8B. As someone who is no stranger to struggle here in Duluth, from violence to housing insecurity to food insecurity and poverty, I am living proof of what's possible when our community has the audacity to insist that every single person in this community matters and deserves to dream and to thrive. And I'm here today as a proud parent. My daughter attends the Ojibwe Immersion School in the Duluth Public Schools. My partner Samantha, I share a home with as a first-time homeowner in the Hunters Park neighborhood. I'm here because of the community that raised me up, and amidst really trying circumstances taught me to rise out of the ashes. And those people included folks like my grandmas and aunties who you'd know in Myers-Wilkins Family Collaborative School. And I'm here with that generational commitment to Duluth, to the state of Minnesota, to breaking down barriers for the people of our communities. And against all odds, I know how to do it. I know how to do it because I'm here as a dealer of hope. And as a proud Latinx person, a gender nonconforming person, an Ojibwe person, it is that for me is the fire that fueled me to run, to stand strong for our communities. And, you know, from running the streets of Lincoln Park is to go on to be a business developer, a higher educator, to helping run the city of Duluth. I'm really proud to be here with the backing of many labor organizations, from SEIU to the Minnesota Nurses to Planned Parenthood, to be a Moms Demand Action Gun Sense candidate. And I know that it is all of this and our coalitions that are going to help us to make sure that we have a government, vibrant communities that have our back. And I am proud to be here and to continue this conversation. And I'm ready to get to work for the people of Duluth and for Minnesota.
Thank you. Now we'll move to those questions solicited and submitted by the organizing committee. Each candidate will have 1.5 minutes to respond, and we'll begin with candidate Kozlowski. What steps, if any, should be taken to increase Minnesotans' access to affordable health care?
Thank you so much for this question, and it is one that, as a state legislator, I see the role as, needing to take care of the health and the well-being of all people. And on the doors, it's something that I hear. It is gripping families, children, elders. Folks are paying out of their pocket for premium. They're paying exorbitant prices for prescription drugs. And for me, I sat with my own dad, who's a Navy veteran, as he fought to get the healthcare access that he desperately needed and deserved. And that's how come I stand here and will stand strong for affordable, comprehensive healthcare for all. I will be somebody who stands strong against Big Pharma to drive down those costs, and also to not tinker around the systems, and let's work at how do we get universal health care for all. There's so much that happened at the Minnesota legislature in the last session, thanks to folks like Representative Jen Schultz, who led in the Health and Human Services to get access to mental health care, to get access to really look at how do we take care of the societal issues that are driving health equity. And so I will be partnering with the Posse Caucus, with the Minnesota Health Plan Caucus, and many others to really make sure that healthcare is a basic human right and that anybody can access it and affordably and when they need it, because it doesn't matter your age, your race, your gender, or your ability. You deserve to have health care. And thank you.
Thank you. Candidate Hall?
Yes, excellent question. Of course, it's an issue that is first and foremost on all of our minds here in Duluth as well as in Minnesota. Access to me relates to availability of healthcare as well as cost. I think and when it comes to availability, I think we saw just how pressing that need is during the COVID crisis. We were threatened with the lack of hospital beds, ICUs for our families, should we need that. And one area where, as your legislator, we could focus on when it comes to availability is a conversation about lifting that hospital construction moratorium and allowing more hospitals to increase the numbers of beds so that we can have more availability for our patients should a crisis like that happen again. Cost. I think we need more transparency when it comes to the cost of healthcare. Right now, the patient is left outside when it's the hospitals and insurance companies determining prices. I think there needs to be more transparency. We could have rules that are very similar to the federal rules that encourage cost transparency for patients so that we can choose our health care at the most affordable price for that. And nursing licensure as well. We should also consider the federal rules of including nurses to have more be able to work in Minnesota.
Thank you. Candidate Hall, for the next question, we'll begin with you. What should the legislature's role, if any, be in determining school curriculum and what is taught in classrooms throughout the state?
Well, unfortunately, we in Minnesota spend a lot of money on education for the right reasons to promote academic excellence. We spend $20 billion of the state's budget on education, but yet 56% of kids cannot do grade level math and 48% cannot do grade level reading. So what can we do? We need to focus on learning readiness. I think we should consider school choice. There's a program in Arizona promoted by their legislature that provides education savings accounts that allow the public funding to go with the students, where the students and the parents can choose which schools would be a best fit for them when it comes to learning readiness. I think we should promote performance pay incentives for teachers. We should be grading schools and school districts on their performance as well, so that parents and kids are going to the best schools possible. We should consider alternate teacher certifications that would include possibly getting skilled people like the trades into the schools teaching kids skills. Not everybody goes to college, so I think that would be a great opportunity to improve academic excellence. And we should also focus on safety in our schools. Minnesota is falling behind. States like Mississippi are #1 in learning readiness, and we could learn from states like Mississippi and Arizona.
Thank you. Candidate Kozlowski?
Thank you so much for this question. For me, this is one that's of utmost importance around what our kids are taught and what they're not taught. For me, growing up in going on to become a first-time MBA holder in my family, it has lifted up not only me, my young family, but our entire community. And I can tell you that growing up from elementary on to college and on to obtain an MBA, that it was very rare for me to see my people, Ojibwe or Latino people or queer folks, represented in our school books, in our curriculum. And if we were, it started in 1492 and erased us and onward. And that is the power of places like Myers-Wilkins, like the school that my daughter goes to every day and receives a culturally specific education. There's a lot of work happening and ongoing that I look forward to being able to get in and champion as a state legislator. The Posse Caucus, as I mentioned, and others have worked on the Teacher of Color bill, so we can have curriculum, books, language, culture that reflects our amazingly diverse families and students, that shows families of all different races and sizes and genders and ages and abilities. We need comprehensive sex education that also affirms our LGBTQ youth. We need restorative justice in our schools, which are right now a school to prison pipeline. Our kids need mental health and cultural supports and not court. And so there's so much to be done, and I look forward to championing in this area.
Thank you. The next question will begin with you. With respect to mining, how would you approach the balance of resource use and environmental protections?
This is another question that I love and is near and dear to my heart as a candidate running for the Minnesota House, as somebody who has grown up here my entire life, that are our ancestral and contemporary homelands. I start off this always with that core to my being, core to my teachings and values that I know that so many Duluthians and Minnesotans share is we take care of children, we take care of elders, we take care of this place, and we take care of each other. So that's how I approach climate justice and resiliency and the balance of mining and how we move to our labor-led 100% clean energy future. We know that the climate crisis is something that is majorly facing us, and we need to do a lot of urgent work around. 100-year storms are happening every 10 years, and so I will take that approach of grounding in value, in people and place, and also pairing that with that we need to make sure that we have economic justice as we go forward. So, that looks like ramping down on our carbon emissions, electrifying everything, conserving energy. And in terms of supporting mining, I support mining. I would take an approach of let's look and make sure we have the strongest environmental regulations and protections. Well, we also look at how can we look at the Minnesota DNR and the Minnesota deed, which is both responsible for permitting mining and promoting it, and untangle that. So we have public process with evidentiary hearings that people don't feel like they're being pushed over, pushed aside, and that we have a pathway to economic justice going forward.
Thank you. Candidate Hall.
Well, as I mentioned in my opening statement, we all want a clean environment, clean water for our family and our citizens here in Minnesota. I think Minnesota does a really good job about doing so. When it comes to mining and energy, especially mining, what a wonderful opportunity to have mining done in our own backyard safely. Let's use PolyMet as an example. That's an entity, a mining company that's been working through the environmental agencies, DNR, the PCA, EPA, forestry, has gone through all that rigid regulatory process and has passed muster on being able to prove that mining can be done safely here in Minnesota. Unfortunately, those on the left who are running the show in St. Paul, the Democrat Party, oppose, throw lawsuits at companies like PolyMet and Twin Metals. There's a moratorium on Twin Metals as well, that we can no longer mine those resources. We need those resources. We should be mining them here in Minnesota where we can do it in a clean manner rather than from other parts of the world. We need those resources for our renewable energies. And I hope we have another question on energy policy as well, because I would love to touch on that. Energy includes the renewables. Mining supports the resources for solar panels, windmills, things like that. And again, I hope we can have a conversation on the energy side of this. But I think here in Minnesota with mining, we can do it clean and safely and protect the environment.
Thank you. Candidate Hall, what's one thing that should be done to improve the region's economy?
Well, one thing we can do is take a moment to slow down government spending. Minnesota is one of the highest tax states in the United States. We have a $9 billion surplus right now, a tax surplus that came from us Duluthians and Minnesotans. A good portion of that should go back into the pockets of Minnesota, of its citizens. They turn around and put it in our economy. We should be doing everything possible to support our local businesses. As I mentioned earlier, I used to work in economic development for the Department of Trade and Economic Development for the state of Minnesota. I worked hands-on with local communities to support job creation. One thing government can do is step out of the way. It's local communities, it's small businesses that create the jobs, not government. Government can become a hindrance with all of its high taxes and regulations. Another thing we can do is support energy resources. I'm very passionate about that include a policy of all of the above. I think about mining here in northeastern Minnesota. It's the backbone of our region, the economic backbone of our region. Its number one cost is energy. So we need to have an energy policy that makes energy not only affordable for our businesses, but also for our citizens.
Thank you. Candidate Kozlowski.
Well, thank you so much for this question. Again, this is one that I am in deeply every single day as an MBA holder at the city on the executive leadership team. We just launched the Northland BIPOC Business Directory, graduated from Leadership Duluth program, and I'm really proud of the work that I've been doing in those intersections to really support our economy and make sure that nobody's left behind as we go forward. And so I really approach it as everything we do is economic development. And that means that we have to take a holistic approach to economic development, right? We know that we need to bolster early child care and education, support our local entrepreneurs. We can grow our property tax base, build sustainable and resilient infrastructure. And that means that we have a lot of work to do at the state legislature to get through that gridlock, pass our tax bill, pass our bonding bill, so we can support children and families. You know, fighting for paid family and medical leave. In our workforce front, we know that as the federal tax is shifting, that we're looking at maybe another wave of, unemployment. So that means we really need to replenish an unemployment insurance trust fund. And we need to modernize our infrastructure. It means we need to support our 148th Fighter Base, our port, our roads, and outdoor economy, which is continuing to not only support the folks who are living here, but help us to grow our tax base by bringing in new residents. So this is an area that I continue to want to carry the water on for Duluth.
Thank you. And we'll start the next question with you. Given the recent Supreme Court ruling regarding Roe v. Wade, state legislatures may be enacting new laws regarding reproductive health issues, including access to care. What measures, if any, do you think the Minnesota legislature should enact regarding reproductive health?
This is a question of utmost urgency, and I do want to say that yesterday, we had a forum that it was alluded that abortion rights are not on the ballot, that reproductive freedom is not on the ballot, and that could not be more false right now. When I'm out there knocking on the doors all across our district, this is one of the top things that come up to mind for people who can get pregnant, for people who have children. What kind of world are we leaving behind? And as an Indigenous person, body sovereignty is everything. And I know that there's so much that we can do at the state legislature, and that starts with codifying Roe. We have a lot of work to do to invest in our abortion care infrastructure, because with the rolling back of our rights, and let's be clear that when we talk about abortion, we're talking about health care, that we're talking about racial and economic justice, period. And that means that Black and brown, queer folks in the rural communities are going to continue to be more severely impacted by these decisions. And so we need legislators who will go down to the state capitol and fight for our human rights. And I will be that. And I'm so proud to carry the backing of Planned Parenthood and Pro-Choice Minnesota, and to looking forward to joining the Minnesota Reproductive Freedom Caucus, because there is a lot that we need to do to protect our rights and also expand that infrastructure of care.
Thank you. Candidate Hall.
As an American who appreciates so much the values of our U.S. Constitution, I appreciate that the U.S. Supreme Court made a decision that said it's up to the states to decide this argument about abortion rights. So here we are, we're in Minnesota, and I know people are concerned that, like in some states, it could be banned here in Minnesota. The wonderful thing about our constitutional rights is that we, the people, get to decide. And in Minnesota right now, it's part of our Minnesota state constitution under Doe versus Gomez, which provides abortion, keeps it legal in Minnesota. So if there's ever going to be a chance that we eliminate abortion in Minnesota, guess who gets to decide? You do, we the people. It would require a constitutional amendment to, which goes to the people to decide whether they want abortion banned in Minnesota or not. I don't see that as a pressing issue right now. Right now, I think what's on the minds of folks in Duluth, when I talk to them, when I'm at their doors, is the skyrocketing gas prices, the empty shelves at the grocery stores, their increase in taxes, their retirement funds shrinking right before their very eyes. Those are the things that folks want to focus on. So that will be my focus at the legislature. I know there are a couple of pieces of legislation that we could work on, and I'm out of time. I wish I could focus or mention that, but maybe another time.
Thank you. We'll have you start with the next question.
Okay.
Minnesota's gun death rate has risen 13% last year over 2020's death rate and 32% over 2019, according to the Minnesota Department of Health. Suicide accounts for 68% of gun deaths in Minnesota. What would you do as a legislator to address this public health epidemic?
Well, sadly, when it comes to the increase in suicide, we definitely need to throw more resources towards mental illness and outreach programs that help those who are in dire need. But, you know, making it difficult for law-abiding citizens to practice their Second Amendment constitutional right to defend themselves doesn't take a gun out of the hands of a criminal who would like to step into a school or a nightclub and wreak havoc. But here's what we can do. At schools, we can secure them. We can, I support having undercover trained marshals that, like what we have with our airlines that are in those schools trying to protect our kids. Things like that. In general, we should be going after the criminals, not those who respect our Second Amendment rights by trying to defend themselves with a firearm. We should be going after the criminals. We should be enforcing our confinement laws and keeping them in jail and not putting them back on the streets. And we should be supporting our police, fully fund them, protect them as they protect us, and get those criminals off the streets.
Thank you. Candidate Kozlowski.
You know, as a parent, this is one of the topics that just is on constant top of mind. It's in our bodies, it's in my spirit. Just last week in the Duluth Public Schools, we had an alert about a fake alleged attack, attempt of gun violence. That literally makes me shake to my core right now as I'm talking. And I know that many parents, many guardians share the same fear. And I will say that more cops do not mean more safety. And we have got to start looking at states like Florida, Massachusetts, California, who are passing more gun laws, common sense gun reform, and creating safer communities there. For the first time in nearly 20 years, our federal government just passed gun law, and that is thanks to the young people, to the folks who are survivors and in our communities who are raising their voices and saying no more. Tiny graves should chill us to our core. So I would absolutely support common sense gun reform, from universal background checks to red flag laws to closing loopholes, to making sure that there's 3 to 7 day waiting periods for folks who might need that and experiencing mental health challenges. But whether it's homicide, suicide, mass shootings, let's be clear that it is Black and brown, trans, youth who are being targeted, and we have got to take immediate and urgent action on gun violence. This is a public health crisis, and I will take action day one in office.
Thank you. Candidate Kozlowski, What infrastructure plans would you like to see advanced and why?
Thank you so much for this question. It's really important to our community. It's something that when I'm out there talking with folks across the district, with our transactors, our businesses, our, our port, so many, we know that our infrastructure is vital, and that Minnesota's report card for our infrastructure has received failing grades. And that's unacceptable, and that's due to years of disinvestment, to not having sustainable funding. And so one of the things that I would definitely do is take a progressive approach to looking at how do we have sustainable, ongoing, adequate funding to support our roads, our bridges, especially in Duluth. We are the regional hub. We have everything right here: rail, ports, vehicles, right? We have multimodal transportation, public buses, and we need to continue to grow how we build out universal design for bikers and non-transit users. So I would be looking at things like the gas tax, at sales tax. How can we continue to spread out the burden on folks so that there's equity in how we sustainably fund it? But there are ways in the state budget, and looking at things like income tax, and in the state budget there's over 350 expenditures and tax breaks that we give to corporations. And I think that we should be looking and really examining if those tax breaks are worth it, or if we can spread that out across the budget to actually sustainably fund infrastructure.
Thank you. Candidate Hall.
Well, let's see. As I mentioned earlier, infrastructure is a huge responsibility and priority for government to fund adequately. So I would support that we fund it adequately. We have a $70 billion state budget. I think there's room in it to fund it properly without asking our citizens for an increase in the gas tax. The Democrat Party would like to see a 20% increase in the gas tax to pay for infrastructure. I'd like to see our state legislature look at different ways within the budget, put it as a number one priority in our bonding bill, infrastructure projects. And yes, Duluth has a lot of needs. Look what we're doing right now. We've got great projects going on right now. They need to be supported, as well as our port and rail, and another part of infrastructure are supporting the pipelines that come through our community and where our energy travels through. Those are all really important projects to support in order to move commerce across Minnesota and across this country, and it supports our economy as well. So it's very important. I'm trying to think what else. Well, I'm done, I guess. Thank you.
Yes, thank you. For the next question, we'll start with you, Candidate Hall. Should any post-secondary education be free? Why or why not?
Depends what you mean by free. I don't think anything is free. Somebody has to pay for it. I think there are plenty of opportunities, and if you're talking college, like a 4-year degree, I think we need to be working hard at how do we keep those costs down. What are we focusing those resources on that make it so expensive for kids to go to college? I'm sending my 5th kid to college, and it's outrageously expensive. And sometimes I think, is it worth the dollars? Is it going to the kids in the classroom, or is it going towards construction? We need to take a really close look at where are those resources going, and if it's worth the expense. And there are other opportunities we should be supporting as well. Technical colleges that actually provide skills that kids can go on further to get great paying jobs. So I wouldn't necessarily say college should be free. That means somebody has to pay for it, and that means you, the taxpayer. And already in this economy, we're paying more than enough for just supporting our families. So to add that burden to Minnesotans, I think is dangerous.
Thank you. Candidate Kozlowski?
As somebody who, again, knows the deep investment and lift that comes from education, I fully support really looking at how is it that we're supporting our learners, our non-traditional students, pathways to higher education, but also to career and trades, for also supporting our local institutions, which we know are drivers of our economy, who bring folks in and again grow our tax base, bringing people here, keeping people here, our workforce dependent on our higher education systems. I absolutely support looking at whether it is free or affordable colleges. I really do support free tuition for 2 and 4 year. I have to applaud organizations and institutions like the U of M, which are making this next year free for tribal members. I think that should be also opportunity opened up to all historically excluded folks. We also know that there's a lot that we need to do and that investments matter around higher education, affordable childcare, mentorship, and mental health supports for folks as they're building their future, starting today by investing in them and being able to reach their fullest potential. There are a lot of policies that we know that contribute to the academic success, and we need to invest in those as well. As well as making it free for learners, curriculum, supporting educators and wraparound services so that students, when they get there, they're nourished and they're cultivated to be able to launch off to whatever career they're going into.
Thank you. Candidate Kozlowski, do you support the Fond du Lac Band of Lake Superior Chippewa's opposition to polymath? Please explain your answer.
For me, as an Indigenous person and a direct descendant from Fond du Lac, it's my tribal ties and teachings that, again, go back to the core of taking care of our children, our elders, and this place and each other. And for me, that always begins with starting with my 4 R's and respect, relationship, reciprocity, and responsibility to one another. And I do stand with the Fond du Lac Band, with our tribal nations in their inherent sovereignty, that we know that treaties are the supreme law of the land. And I also stand with our communities who are fighting climate justice and seeking economic justice. In Duluth right now, we have the St. Louis River Corridor, who is downwind from polymet. We got it wrong 30 years ago. And we just this week celebrated the restoration of that river and reseeding wild rice beds. And I think right now what we need to do is take a step back and make sure that we get it right going forward. So again, that goes back to making sure we have good public process. I believe in science, in making sure that we have evidentiary hearings and strong regulations, and that Governor Walz and the State of Minnesota Climate Action Plan actually brings together environmental activists, researchers, scientists, labor unions, and everyday people, and we can get to a path forward. But I do stand with the band in upholding their sovereignty.
Thank you. Candidate Hall.
Well, mentioning those 4 R's, the most important of those 4 R's is respect. And I completely respect the band's position on, wanting to care for the community. I get that. I don't support their opposition. We have spent 15 to 20 years with polymet alone, going through that regulatory process and focusing on the science of making sure that polymet can be done safely and not harm the environment. As a matter of fact, I want to say probably 10 years ago, I visited polymet. It's up near Virginia. They're actually recycling an old mining plant, LWV, and walked through that process and listened to the folks who are doing the work there. And it's impressive how they're able to do this copper nickel mining process and keep the environment in mind, keeping it safe. In the last 20 years that I've lived in Duluth, there have been many a public hearing on PolyMet, and they've received the permits, they've passed muster with those regulatory agencies, and yet lawsuit after lawsuit is thrown at them to make them jump through one more hoop. The science is there, they're able to do it. I think it's time to start supporting PolyMet. It's good for our environment to have it done here in a clean and safe manner.
Thank you. Candidate Hall, what measures, if any, would you support to ensure all Minnesotans have access to reliable broadband needed for businesses and for schooling?
You know, that was when I didn't have a chance to wrap up on infrastructure. Broadband, I think, is part of infrastructure, so it should be funded adequately, I believe, through the state of Minnesota. I think it's important. And in this day and age, I don't know how you can survive in this new economy without broadband service. So again, in that $70 billion budget, there should be room for resources that go towards broadband. And just being in Duluth alone, I think we could use some improvements on broadband. So I think it's an important priority to support for the legislature.
Thank you. Candidate Kozlowski?
Yeah, for me, this is broadband is certainly infrastructure. No other time did we see that as a reality amidst the COVID pandemic. You know, it's healthcare, it's education, it's educational opportunity, it's economic development, it's also social connectedness. We have also a crisis of loneliness, as I've heard it described. And in a time where we are finding our way back to each other, broadband's critical. It's critical for entrepreneurs, for remote workers. And so, you know, in the city of Duluth, proud to have been working on the broadband piloting initiatives, you know, in Lincoln Park. It's expensive, and what we saw is that we can build out the networks here, but we need really strong partners around the state, federal side to be able to actually build that out. You know, the project alone in Lincoln Park is estimated at $7 million. To build that out fully across the city is in the range of $25 million. And so as we look at you know, the aspects of broadband, another really important piece is also digital navigation. We know that seniors and folks who may not have the technology devices, they need that, and especially for folks with different abilities. So I'm really proud to have gotten that out into the hands of folks who need the devices, but also pairing them with the support that they need to be able to have digital inclusion. And again, I really look forward to how can we make sure that we're connected, competitive, and cared for in every corner of the state with border-to-border broadband.
Thank you. We'll start the next question with you. How do you define leadership? What skills do you have that will make you an effective legislator?
This is one that when I closed my eyes and I thought about running, and many, many people from across the community, across the state, reached out to say, please run. We need somebody like you who is a dealer of hope, who has your lived experience, who has your education, who has your lifetime of local rooting and experience already in local and state government, to bring that to the halls of power in the Capitol. And for me, it is really bringing the ability to bring folks together across race, across geography, across ability, across gender, that in our community in District 8B, we have never had anybody like me represent our district. And folks on the door, I can tell you, are excited about that. They are excited that in the primary and in the general election, they get to vote for a Latinx, Ojibwe, gender nonconforming person. And you know, being able to bring the statewide networks from the nonprofits to housing to agencies like DEED down to the local level of working actively and currently on issues that are facing our community, opioid crisis, housing, economic development. There are so many things that being able to pair and not just be the voice for our community. Our community members already have a voice. It is about putting the power into the hands of our people, and that is what people are excited about. And what I'm bringing to the halls of St. Paul is our people and their power and their voice.
Thank you. Candidate Hall.
excuse me, the question was leadership
Yeah.
skills.
Would you like me to repeat it?
Sure.
Sure. How do you define leadership, and what skills do you have that will make you an effective legislator?
Okay. Leadership. I think it's somebody who, well, I'll just speak for myself. I can work well with many. Whether you agree or not, I truly believe I'm a people person. I enjoy working one-on-one as well as in a team environment where there may be a pressing issue that we need to address, and I don't have all the answers, I don't have all the expertise, but I do have ears, and it's great to sit at a table as a team and just throw all our ideas out there and determine, okay, which ones are gonna work, which ones are affordable, what can we compromise on? There's no such thing as somebody getting their way all the time. Maybe that's me being a mom of 5. I've had to raise 5 kids, and I feel like that's my team. And quite often we disagree, and but you know what? We can come together and get things done, and for the better of our family. And I believe I can bring that kind of experience to the legislature. I also, when I worked in economic development, traveled across the state of Minnesota, and we would sit down and talk about what are the pressing needs in our community, and how can we help, and how can we do this together. I also worked at the legislature, where I have relationships with folks on both sides of the aisle, so I feel like I could join the legislature, represent you with a can-do attitude, and reach across the aisle and get things done. Okay, I have to stop. Thanks.
Thank you. And this will be our last question before we move on to closing statements. We'll start with you, Candidate Hall. Discuss a topic of your choice that voters would be interested in and that we haven't yet covered.
Oh. Okay, and you know, one thing I wanted to mention, and this will tie into an issue that we haven't really touched a lot on right now, and that is, if I'm fortunate enough to represent you in St. Paul and I ask for your vote on November 8th, I would like to be part of the, I'm very supportive of our energy, all of the above energy policy and mining, so I'd like to be part of the Climate and Energy Committee, the Environmental and Natural Resource. But to talk about the issue that I think is most near and dear to my heart right now, it's public safety. That would be another committee I would like to be a part of. I'm very concerned about crime increasing in Minnesota. It's like over 20% now. I want to be a legislator that supports our law enforcement professionals, gives them the resources and the tools they need to keep themselves safe, because they're keeping us safe in our communities. I would like to see us send more resources so that we have more police on the streets. And you know, I think about what's happened in especially in the metro area. Our current leadership in St. Paul and in the Twin Cities on the Democrat side watched a police station burn down. We need leaders who are going to support our police, lift them up, lift their morale up, but also say, you know what, you have our back, we have yours. We need more police on the street. The minority communities where a lot of this crime is happening, they want more police on the street. It will help keep us safe.
Thank you. Candidate Kozlowski.
Something I want to talk about is housing for all. We have a $9 billion surplus, and yet I don't think that we have a surplus at all, because we have everyday folks who are living outdoors, who are sleeping in buses and on rail. Those are not places where folks should be living. They should have a home to call home every single night that's safe and secure. So that is the number one issue for me headed down to the state capitol. Housing, it's economic development, right? It's health equity. And the other thing that I want to address is public safety. We had a $100 million public safety bill that tackles safety and accountability. And yet we couldn't pass it, including the gender-based violence legislation that I have put forward with our African heritage and indigenous communities. That should be a bipartisan thing that we can get behind. And what's unique for me that I want to add is that this breadth of experience and networks from across the communities that I'm bringing that doesn't show up on resumes but is my superpower at bringing these communities together to be able to address solutions that other people don't even see. And I will also say that I've heard a lot of rhetoric about attacks on communities of color and LGBTQ people that I think speak a lot more about the folks who are saying that than it does about us and our value. And you know what? If you're worried about healthcare, what I can say is that we've got you, that we're going to go down and fight for universal care, for families to afford college, for the things that we know are coming forward with possibilities. And that's what I'm bringing to the state capitol.
Thank you. At this time, we will ask each candidate to give a 2-minute closing statement. We will start with candidate Kozlowski.
Well, I want to start by saying thank you so much for the opportunity to be a part of this forum and for voters to get to hear from me and on the issues that are important to our community. From leading on the opioid crisis to the housing crisis to providing business supports to culturally specific strengths, I'm bringing this experience to St. Paul. And most of all, I'm bringing the resilient people with me who community members are the ones that taught me how to be resilient and have taught me to never give up. As an ultramarathoner, I am ready to run hard for Duluth. And I know that from door knocking from Lakeside to Congdon to Central Hillside, here's what I can tell you, that the solutions to our biggest challenges are right here in our community. And what I can tell you is that too often we don't ask our own communities. We don't trust our own communities to lead, to invest right here, especially in communities of color and queer communities. And that's why having a voice like mine that has never represented 8B is transformative. That when we get down to the Capitol, I will be fierce for all of us. And there's a really clear choice in this election. So if we want fierce action on a labor-led clean energy future, I have your back. If we're looking to advance healthcare access for all that's affordable and available right here in our community, I have your back. If we're looking for an economy that lifts everybody forward, I have your back and I will carry the water for Duluth. And if we want a community that's safe and secure and free of violence for all community members, I have your back at St. Paul. And I know that in this moment that we have not got to talk about voter registration where only a quarter of folks in Minnesota are registered to vote. We can't shame folks into not voting. We have to give people a reason to believe, to hope, to have the possibilities for the future. And I can tell you that I am all in on this community, and I ask you to be too.
Thank you. Candidate Hall.
Well, thank you once again for this opportunity to be here today. You know, we both see ways to help. And we always would like to say yes to this program or that, but sometimes we have to say no, or if not, no for right now, until we can look at other ways to fit these ideas in the budget instead of always falling back on raising taxes. Again, how much do you have left in your family budget to send to the state once you're done paying for those high gas prices and the grocery bill and the retirement savings is disappearing and your property tax statement? Remember where those dollars come from. They're your tax dollars. In addition to protecting that hard-earned dollar of yours and putting it back in your pocket, my top priorities are, number one, public safety. That we really need. I'm worried about the safety of our neighborhoods. There needs to be a focus on supporting our police instead of reimagining them or defunding them. That's been the attitude for the last couple of years that are in our state. So I think we need a legislator who's going to stand behind our police. Another priority of mine is the economy, getting out of the way of job creation so that we can get people back to work and that we're growing our economy. And one great way, and third priority, is supporting energy and mining. That is the backbone of our region here in northeastern Minnesota. When you look at the representation up here, not a lot of representation supporting our mining and energy resources. So I would be a candidate who would be very supportive of that. And what else am I committed to? First and foremost, my family, my husband, and our 5 wonderful kids. I'm running for office to make life better for them and for you. And I'll work very hard for you as your legislator in St. Paul.
Thank you. This concludes the candidate forum for the office of the Minnesota House of Representatives, District 8B. It is our purpose in sponsoring events such as this to provide you with an opportunity to hear candidates discuss issues that are important to you. There is never enough time to cover all of the issues in a limited time setting such as this. If your questions were not addressed, you should feel free to contact the candidates directly. We hope this program has helped you learn more about the candidates and the issues so that you can make an informed choice at the polls on November 8th. We thank the candidates, PACT-TV, and you for making this event possible. PACT-TV will carry this forum and others. Check their listing for a schedule of times. Thank you.